Close your eyes for just one moment. Think about the last photograph you took. Now think about the last photograph you actually printed, framed, or put somewhere safe. If you are struggling to remember, this video is for you. Welcome to Moments We Remember. Today, we are going back, long before the cloud, long before the smartphone, long before the word storage meant anything other than a shelf or a drawer, to a time when preserving a memory required something far more powerful than a password. It required intention, it required love, and it required knowing deep in your bones that some things are simply too precious to leave to chance. Close your eyes for just one moment. Think about the last photograph you took. Now think about the last photograph you actually printed, framed, or put somewhere safe. If you are struggling to remember, this video is for you. Welcome to Moments We Remember. Today, we are going back, long before the cloud, long before the smartphone, long before the word storage meant anything other than a shelf or a drawer, to a time when preserving a memory required something far more powerful than a password. It required intention, it required love, and it required knowing deep in your bones that some things are simply too precious to leave to chance. Our grandparents knew things about memory that we have quietly forgotten, and today we are going to remember them together. Let us begin with the letters. In almost every old home, in almost every culture, there was a box. Sometimes tin, sometimes wooden, sometimes just a worn cardboard container held shut with a rubber band so old it had fused to the surface. Inside that box were letters, handwritten letters, sometimes dozens of them, sometimes hundreds, bundled together with ribbon or string or nothing at all, just stacked carefully, the way you stack things you do not want to damage. These letters were not dashed off the way we send messages today. Writing a letter in the era before email meant sitting down with purpose. It meant finding paper, finding a pen that worked, thinking carefully about what you wanted to say, because you could not unsend it, could not edit it, could not add a reaction emoji if you felt the words were not landing right. You wrote it, you sealed it, you sent it out into the world, and then you waited, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, for a reply. And because of all that effort, the person who received the letter kept it. Of course they kept it. It represented someone's time, someone's thought, someone's deliberate choice to sit down and say, "You matter enough to me that I will do this slow, careful thing." That is the first lesson our grandparents understood about memory. A memory is worth keeping when it costs something to make it. Now, let us talk about photographs, because the way our grandparents treated photographs would seem almost unbelievable to us today. A family in the 1950s or 60s might have taken 12 photographs in an entire year. 12! You would take them on a camera with actual film that had to be carefully wound and eventually taken somewhere to be developed, a process that cost money and took time. And when those photographs came back, you looked at them with the same attention a jeweler gives to a gemstone, because there were only 12. Every single one was precious. The family photograph album was not a casual thing. It sat on a special shelf. It was brought out on special occasions. Children were gathered around it the way children are gathered around a campfire, with the same sense that something meaningful is about to happen. And a grandmother or a mother or an aunt would open it and begin to speak. This is your great uncle on his wedding day. See how proud he looks? He was so nervous that morning he could not eat breakfast. But by the evening, he was dancing until midnight. This is the house where your grandfather grew up. It does not exist anymore. They built a road through it. But see the garden there on the left? Your great-grandmother grew roses there. She always said roses were the only flowers worth the trouble. The photograph was not the memory. The conversation around the photograph was the memory. The album was just the door. The real thing was the story that walked through it. And this brings us to something even older than letters and photographs. Something so ancient, we have almost entirely lost it. The oral tradition. Every family had one. One person who remembered everything. An elder, a grandmother, a great uncle, a family patriarch who sat in the corner of the room at gatherings and seemed to be half listening until someone asked the right question, and suddenly they were alive with story. These people were the family's living archive. They remembered names 4 and 5 generations back. They remembered the year of the drought, the year of the flood, the year when everything changed. And why? They remembered the original version of every family story, the real version, before it got softened or reshaped by the comfort of time. And they told those stories again and again, not because they had forgotten they had told them before, but because they understood something crucial. A story that is only told once is a story that is already dying. You have to tell it many times, to many people, across many years, before it has any chance of surviving you. This is what our grandparents knew that we have forgotten. Memory is not a product. It is a practice. You do not save a memory once and walk away. You tend it. You return to it. You keep it alive by bringing it into the present again and again. There was another form of memory preservation that happened quietly in the hands of women who may not have thought of themselves as doing anything important at all. The needlework, the quilts and embroideries and stitched tablecloths and crocheted blankets that took months to complete and lasted for decades. These were not just decorative objects, they were documents. A quilt made from the fabric of old dresses held the history of every occasion those dresses were worn to. A tablecloth stitched with the patterns of a homeland left behind was a map of belonging. A prayer mat bordered with designs copied from a grandmother's memory of a house she would never return to was an act of devotion to the past. Women who could not always write their stories into words stitched them into cloth instead. And cloth, as it turns out, is remarkably durable. Some of those pieces survive today in the homes of descendants who may not fully understand what they are holding, but who cannot bring themselves to throw it away, because the object carries a weight they can feel, even if they cannot name it. Then there were the recipe books. Oh, do not underestimate the recipe book. Written in the margins of old cookbooks, on loose papers tucked inside them, on the backs of envelopes used as bookmarks, were notes that were worth more than the recipes themselves. Add extra spice in winter. This is the dish for celebrations. Do not rush this one. It takes as long as it takes. These notes were philosophy disguised as cooking instructions. They were a portrait of a person, pressed between pages like a dried flower. Those marginal notes told you how someone thought, what they valued, what they had learned through repetition and failure, and the long education of feeding people you love. You could read a grandmother's recipe book and come away knowing her in a way that no official biography could achieve. Now, here is the uncomfortable question this video has been building toward. What are we leaving behind? We are taking more photographs than any generation in human history. We are sending more messages, recording more moments, capturing more seconds of more days than our grandparents could have imagined in their wildest dreams. And yet there is a growing feeling, and perhaps you have felt it yourself, that we are somehow losing more than we are saving. Because having 10,000 photographs is not the same as tending 12. When everything is saved, nothing is chosen. When nothing is chosen, nothing is truly valued. When nothing is truly valued, the archive grows and grows and becomes a kind of beautiful, overwhelming noise, full of everything, meaning nothing in particular. Our grandparents could not keep everything. Scarcity forced them into the act of choosing. And choosing, as it turns out, is where meaning lives. The things they chose to keep, they kept with their whole hearts. They read those letters until the paper went soft. They told those stories until the words were worn smooth. They brought out that album until every child in the family knew every face in it. That is what we are being asked to remember today. Not to throw away our phones or delete our photos, but to choose sometimes. To print one photograph. To write one letter by hand. To call someone and tell them a story out loud instead of sending them a link. To find the old box in the back of someone's closet and sit with it for an hour and let it speak to you. To remember that memory is love. It is love made durable. It is love that reaches across time and touches the face of someone who was not yet born when the moment happened. Every photograph your grandmother saved, every letter she kept, every story she told, she was talking to you. She was saying, I was here. This mattered. You come from something real and warm and full of life. The question is whether we are saying the same thing to the people who will come after us, whether the memories we are making today are ones that can be held in two hands, passed between generations, and still carry warmth decades from now. Our grandparents preserved memories with everything they had because they understood that a life without memory is a life without roots. And a person without roots, no matter how high they grow, will always feel the wind a little more than they should. So today, after this video ends, do one small thing. Write something down on paper. Print one photograph. Tell someone a story they have not heard before. Begin the practice of choosing. Because the memories you tend today are the heirlooms your grandchildren will hold tomorrow. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Moments We Remember. Every week, we come back to the wisdom that lived in our grandparents' hands and ask what it means for the lives we are living now. Share this video with someone who grew up hearing stories the old way, and leave a comment below. What is one memory your grandparent gave you that you still carry today? We will see you in the next one.